Hello friends, most welcome to the crash course of psycholinguistics. In this video, we will discuss in detail about Sapir-Whorf Hypothesis. We will also discuss about linguistic determinism and linguistic relativism. Okay, let's shortly describe Sapir-Whorf Hypothesis. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is a theory in psycholinguistics that posits that the structure, grammar, and vocabulary of a language influence and shape the thoughts, perceptions, and worldview of its speakers. The hypothesis suggests that different languages provide distinct cognitive frameworks, and the speakers of different languages have varying perceptions and interpretations of the world based on their linguistic systems. It asserts that language influences thought by providing cognitive categories and influencing attention to certain aspects of the world, but does not necessarily claim that language determines thought completely. Actually, there are two main versions of Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Number first as linguistic determinism, and the second one is linguistic relativity. Okay, so what is linguistic determinism? It is the strong version of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. It suggests that the language we speak strongly influences or even determines the way we think and perceive the world. While there is ongoing debate about the extent of linguistic determinism, there are some examples and studies that provide evidence for this phenomena. Okay, so here we have some supportive studies of linguistic determinism. Number first is color perception. One classic example is how language affects our perception of color. Different languages categorize and name colors differently, which can shape the way speakers of those languages perceive and discriminate colors. For example, Russian has separate words for light and dark blue, голубой and синий, and studies have shown that Russian speakers are faster at distinguishing between light and dark shades of blue compared to English speakers who have just one word for both shades. Okay, number second is spatial relations. Language can influence spatial reasoning and conceptualization. For instance, certain languages like English primarily make use of absolute spatial terms left, right, up, down, etc., whereas others like the Gugu Yamithri language of Australia primarily use cardinal directions like north, south, east, west. Studies have shown that speakers of languages relying on cardinal direction have an enhanced ability to navigate and conceptualize space in multiple directions. Okay, so we have the third supportive study of linguistic determinism, and that is time perception. Language can also affect how individuals perceive and understand time. For example, studies have shown that languages that grammatically require speakers to specify the future tense versus languages that don't can influence speakers' perception and planning of future events. Speakers of futureless languages are more likely to take a present focused perspective in their thinking and decision making. Okay, number fourth is gender stereotypes. Language can reinforce and perpetuate gender stereotypes. For example, in many languages, masculine forms are used as the default, and feminine forms are often used for female specific roles or occupations. This linguistic pattern can shape and reinforce societal gender biases and expectations. Okay, now we have some critical studies of linguistic determinism. While the evidence for linguistic determinism is not conclusive, these examples highlight how language can influence various aspects of cognition and perception. Psycholinguistic studies continue to investigate the relationship between language and thought, helping us better understand the complex interaction between language and cognition. Linguistic determinism, or the strong form of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, faced several limitations and critical studies in the field of psycholinguistics. Some of the key critical studies are as follows. Number first is lack of empirical evidence. Empirical evidence supporting strong linguistic determinism is limited and often controversial. Many studies that initially seemed to support the hypothesis were later challenged due to methodological flaws or alternative explanation. It is difficult to establish a clear cause and effect relationship between language and thought, making it hard to provide concrete evidence for linguistic determinism. Okay, number second is individual and cultural variation. Language is one of many factors that shape our thoughts and perceptions. While language can influence cognition to some extent, other factors such as individual experiences, socialization, and cultural norms also play a significant roles. The variability in individuals' cognitive abilities and experiences suggest that language cannot be the sole determinant of thought. Okay, number third is translation and bilingualism. The existence of translation between languages challenges the notion of linguistic determinism. If language determined thought entirely, translation would not be possible or would result in a loss of meaning. However, translation in common practice, showing that different languages can convey similar concepts even if they have different linguistic structures. Fourth is cognitive universals. Some cognitive processes and concepts are found across different languages and cultures, suggesting cognitive universality. For example, basic cognitive processes like perception, memory, and problem solving are not fundamentally altered by the language one speaks. This universality suggests that there are underlying cognitive processes that are shared by humans regardless of their language. Number fifth is multilingualism and cognitive flexibility. Many individuals are proficient in multiple languages, which challenges the idea of strict linguistic determinism. Multilingual individuals are often able to switch between languages and adapt their thinking accordingly, suggesting that language does not rigidly constrain their thoughts or perceptions. Number six is cultural influence. Culture plays a significant role in shaping cognition and perception alongside language. Language is deeply intertwined with culture, and cultural practices and beliefs can influence the way individuals think and perceive the world. Therefore, it is challenging to isolate the influence of language from broader cultural factors. Okay, it is important to note that these criticisms do not negate the influence of language on cognition but highlight the limitations of strong linguistic determinism. Current research focuses on understanding the complex interaction of language, cognition, and culture to provide a more nuanced understanding of how language shapes our thoughts and perceptions. Okay, the second version of Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is linguistic relativism, the weak version of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Linguistic relativism suggests that language influences our thoughts and perceptions to some extent, but does not determine them entirely. This view acknowledges the role of language in shaping our thinking but allows for other factors such as cognition and culture to also play a significant role. There is evidence supporting linguistic relativism in the field of psycholinguistics, including the following examples. Number first is language specific cognitive biases. Studies have found that different language structures can lead to cognitive biases in speakers. For example, languages that grammatically distinguish between direct and indirect objects, like in Spanish, can result in speakers paying more attention to relationship and perspectives of individuals mentioned in sentences. In contrast, languages without this distinction like English may encourage a more object-oriented viewpoint. Thus, language structure can influence the way we think about and perceive certain events. Number second is perception of time. While linguistic determinism suggests that language completely determines our perception of time, linguistic relativism suggests that language influences our understanding of time. Cultural and linguistic differences in how time is conceptualized have been observed. For instance, English speakers often use horizontal spatial metaphors to talk about time. For example, I will move the meeting forward, whereas Mandarin Chinese speakers tend to use vertical spatial metaphors. For example, I will move the meeting up. These linguistic differences can influence how individuals conceptualize and perceive time, but it does not mean that one group is inherently more time oriented than the other. The third supportive study of linguistic relativism is language and memory. Research has shown that language influences the way we remember events. For example, studies have found that individuals tend to remember details of an event better if the language they use allows for detailed verbal description. Similarly, languages that grammatically require speakers to provide gender information, such as in Spanish or French, have been shown to enhance speakers' ability to recall the gender of objects compared to languages that do not require such gender marking like English. Okay, now here we have some critical studies of linguistic relativism. These examples support the idea that language influences thinking and cognition, but they also suggest that other factors such as culture and individual experiences play a role in shaping our thoughts. Linguistic relativism recognizes the complex interaction between language, cognition, and culture, highlighting that while language has an impact on our thoughts, it does not solely determine them. Linguistic relativism or weak linguistic determinism also has its limitations and criticisms. Some of the key limitations are as follows. Number first is individual variation. While linguistic relativism acknowledges the influence of language on thought, it does not fully account for individual variation. People within the same linguistic community that may have different thoughts and perceptions despite sharing the same language. Factors such as personal experiences, education, and cultural background can shape individual cognitive processes and may override linguistic influences. Okay, number second is overemphasis on language. Linguistic relativism tends to prioritize the role of language in shaping cognition, potentially overlooking the contributions of other cognitive processes. Various cognitive abilities such as memory, attention, and problem solving also influences how we think and perceive the world. Language is just one tool used by cognitive processes and is not the sole determinant of cognition. Okay, the third critical study of linguistic relativism is influence of culture. While linguistic relativism acknowledges the interaction between language and culture, it may not fully account for the significant influence of culture on cognition. Cultural practices, values, and beliefs shape individuals' thoughts and perceptions beyond influence of language alone. Culture includes non-linguistic factors that can significantly impact cognition and may sometimes overshadow the influence of language. Okay, number four is translation and bilingualism. Similar to the criticism faced by linguistic determinism, linguistic relativism struggles to address the existence of translation and bilingualism. If language solely determined thought, translation between languages would not be possible without significant loss or distortion of meaning. However, translation is a common practice suggesting that concepts and thoughts can be conveyed across different languages despite variation in linguistic structures. Okay, number fifth is lack of precise and causal mechanism. The mechanism through which language influences thought and perception are not well understood. While there is evidence of language affecting certain cognitive processes such as color perception or spatial cognition, the specific cognitive mechanism and pathways involved are still under investigation. Without a clear understanding of these mechanisms, it becomes challenging to assert the extent and exact nature of linguistic influences. Number 6 is difficulty in isolating the influence of language. It is difficult to isolate the influence of language from other factors that shape cognition, such as education, social environment, and personal experiences. Language is deeply intertwined with these factors, making it challenging to attribute changes in thought or perception solely to linguistic influences. Despite these limitations, linguistic relativism provides valuable insights into how language can shape cognition and emphasizes the importance of language in understanding human thought. Future research will continue to explore the complex interplay between language, culture, and cognition to develop a more comprehensive understanding of how language influences our thoughts and perceptions. Okay, thanks for watching the video and please do not forget to subscribe my YouTube channel. If you have any query, any question, any confusion, you can ask in the comment section or you can message us on Instagram or Facebook.